Do you want to stay more focused on the right goals in your life, or even just figure out what the right goals are for you? Do you want clarity? Do you want better work-life balance? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Success Through Failure.
Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Success Through Failure. Today, I bring you another solo episode. This is the third in a four-part series titled Defining Moments. Having the courage to face fear, take action, speak up, and move on. And so the first two episodes were 182 and episode 183. 182 was about facing your fear. 183 was about taking action. Today we're going to talk about speaking up. And you can find this in all of the episodes for Defining Moments, this series, this four-part series. If you go to jimharshawjr.com/defining moments. And like I said, so far it's 182, 183, and this episode is episode 185. And we all know that we have these defining moments in our lives. And sometimes we create them. Sometimes they happen to us, right? Sometimes you create them when you ask someone to marry you, right? Or you have kids. Sometimes they happen to you, right? When you get that surprise promotion or you get fired or something else happens in your life that's outside of your control. And so what we're talking about is, how do we handle those, right? How do we handle them if we know they're coming? How do we manifest those and create those if we know we need to have that defining moment? We know we need something to change. We know we want change in our lives. How do we create that defining moment, that catalyst that propels us into a new part of our life? And if that is outside of your control, how do you handle that? How do you process that? And that's a little bit about what we're talking about today, because today, speaking up is around where you're maybe in a situation where you don't want to be in, or you really want to get to that next level, or have that tough conversation that allows you to have that defining moment, that allows you to turn the page, to take that next step, to get to the next level. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm lucky enough to be able to have a lot of these conversations and help people have their defining moments whenever we work together, whenever I'm coaching them and talking to them. And it's pretty awesome thing to be a part of. One of my clients actually has written a book. He's in the process of refining and editing some chapters, but we just got done with what he considered, and he told me was the most productive year of his life. And this is an individual who has accomplished quite a bit in his life, but we had a lot of these conversations, a lot of tough conversations to help push him through different challenges and create his own defining moments even throughout the course of 2018. And so looking at 2019, we're having more of these conversations. And this is the kind of thing that you need to do. If you need to break out of your rut, have that breakthrough, if you know that you're not achieving at the level that you know you could be, if you feel like you're leaving too much on the table, you need to create this defining moment, right? Whether it's facing your fear or taking action or speaking up or moving on, right? You've got to create that defining moment or handle that defining moment in the right way. So when it comes to speaking up, a lot of people are afraid to speak up, right? To say the thing that needs to be said. Certainly, I know I have that a lot of times as well. And so it was really helpful for me to think through this episode and put this together because this was really kind of me coaching myself as well. And by doing this, it's allowed me the insights that it's allowed me. I think back when I was coaching wrestling, right? Whenever I was in college competing, and then I would coach younger athletes wrestling, I'd have to tell them, when you're taking a double leg, you got to keep your head up. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I got to keep my own head up. So it's like this level of accountability whenever you're a coach. And so I felt lucky enough to be able to put this episode together for you because I got a lot of benefit out of it as well. So here's some thoughts whenever it comes to actually speaking up. This is the first and I would say most important. The underlying theme here is whenever you're going to speak up to somebody, about something, right? Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's somebody you're in a relationship with. Maybe it's an investor, right? You want for your business. Whatever it is, whoever it is you have to speak up to, look from their perspective, right? You've got to really look at things from the other person's point of view, right? Whether you're trying to ask for the sale or trying to ask for the promotion or whatever it is, whatever the other thing else it is that you're trying to talk about, you've got to look at it from their perspective. And I have a great quote here from General Stanley McChrystal. And he said this. He said, and I quote, he said, "Our enemies often have a rational position and it's very defensible. In many cases, if you put yourself on the other side of the table, you could see their position. And except for fate, you may be on that side." And this is from a former 4-star general. And he said that on the Tim Ferriss show. And you think about that. This is a guy who his job was to beat the enemy, right? And we think of these kind of guys, these generals, like these kind of individuals, these leaders, and we think that they're tough and it's my way or the highway, and there's a right way and a wrong way. Well, no, he's actually saying that there's often a rational position, even for the enemy, even for, in that situation, in his situation, gosh, suicide bombers, right? And people that were fighting against our forces for whatever that they were fighting for. And he said, gosh, except for fate, we may be on the other side of that table, right? Just like the quote there, "But for the grace of God, I go," right? So if you were in their shoes, you would think that way. You would feel that way. I mean, you would, right? If you were raised by the same people, if you had the same influences in your life, if your brain worked the same way, right? Then you actually would feel the same way. If you were actually in their shoes, you would have all those same influences and you would actually feel the same way, right? So that person actually has a defensible position. So how do you handle that, right? Look at it from their perspective. And this is really the underlying theme of this is approach everything with, and I say this at the risk of sounding corny, but I say it meaning that this is the most important way you can approach any conversation is with love, right? Love and understanding. If you can understand and try to see it from their perspective, your conversation is going to go a lot better, right? Whether you're trying to make the sale or get the investment or have that relationship conversation or anything else in your life, approach it with love. Another one is this: ask questions. Ask questions. Whenever you need to speak up, start with asking questions. Start with understanding that person's point of view and where they're coming from. So if you want to understand their perspective, like I talked in the first one, you've got to ask questions. So speaking up starts with asking questions. Like in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, seek first to understand and then to be understood, right? And that starts with asking questions. And next is this: don't complain, right? Don't complain. Don't throw somebody under the bus. Don't throw your competitor under the bus. In the athletic recruiting world, it's called negative recruiting, right? That's not a good way to go about it. But don't complain. Speak in the positive. Speak in the affirmative. Another one is this: be concise. And that may take practice, right? If you have to speak up about something, you may have to practice if you want to be concise, because oftentimes when you are not concise, you convey weakness or you never actually get to the point that you're trying to make. So be concise. Another one is this: avoid using the word but. Or if you use the word but in a sentence, it negates everything else that you said before that, right? Just psychologically, that's what happens. You negate everything that you've said before the word but. If you said to your significant other, I really love whenever you load the dishwasher and wash the dishes, but you always seem to leave, a handful of dishes out and you don't get them in the dishwasher. They only hear the second part of that. Everything that came before the word but, all the compliment, all the nice stuff, that gets negated when you use the word but. Try switching that word to and. I really love when you load the dishwasher, And if you make sure you get everything off the counter and off the kitchen table first, we'll have to wash the dishes fewer times, all right? We'll get everything in the dishwasher after dinner. So switching the but to an and, or just leaving that word out. Whenever you say but, it really negates everything you say before that. So another one is this. Get help, right? If you have trouble speaking up in front of an audience in a crowd, go to Toastmasters. That's what I did. It led to a TEDx talk, actually. I actually struggled speaking up in front of a crowd one time, and I got really nervous. And I said, man, this can't be. So I signed up for Toastmasters, started going once a month. They had meetings every week, but I knew I couldn't do every week. So I said, listen, I'm going to go every month. I'm going to go at least once a month. So I went once a month for about 6 months or 9 months, I think it was. And then the opportunity came up to do a TEDx talk. And gosh, people go, Jim, you're a great speaker. It started from failure. It started from struggle. And I had to learn to speak up. And I had to learn to speak in front of an audience. So if you have trouble speaking up, certainly in front of a group, try Toastmasters. Or if you have a challenge that you can't quite figure out or solve yourself, maybe it's a relationship challenge, or maybe it's a health or wellness challenge or something, and something you need to speak up about, get counseling. There's professionals that are trained to do this. Or get a coach, somebody who's fully invested in you. They can help you see your blind spots. They can help you take off your blinders. They can help you see what you can't see. And they're going to ask you the questions that you know that you need to be asked. I definitely recommend getting a counselor, getting a coach, or at the very least a mentor. Mentors are great. They're not always fully invested in you, but absolutely it's valuable to have those relationships as well. They'll help you think about these things, these areas where you need to speak up in your life. And just recently, I actually had a great interview with episode 181 with Sheila Heen. And so I get just episode 181, and she talks a lot about having difficult conversations. So there's a lot of great tips and tactics in that episode. And again, jimharshawjr.com/181. If you want to get the action plan from that episode, as well as this episode and every other episode, just go to jimharshawjr.com/action and you can get the action plans from all these episodes. But anyway, that episode with Sheila Heen was really, really helpful. And she talked about having difficult conversations, how to have those difficult conversations. Another one that I want to recommend, another podcast episode that's really relevant here that I want to recommend is an episode where this individual guest talked about really being true to yourself, about speaking up when you need to speak up, and just living your life the way that you know you want to live your life, and really being true to yourself. And that is episode 158 with Cody Lundeen. And if that name rings a bell, you may have heard of him. He was the co-host of a show called Dual Survivor, a co-star of that show on Discovery Channel. And he was the guy in bare feet, in shorts, in every weather, in every climate, every environment, and just an amazing, amazing individual, and just the way he lives his life. Just absolutely fascinating. As a matter of fact, one of my clients went out with Cody Lundeen and took his 7-day desert survivor course where you go out in the desert and you learn how to survive in the desert. Anyway, super, super interesting guy. But just a guy who he walks to the beat of his own drum and totally lives his life his own way. So anyway, I recommend those episodes. If you struggle speaking up, get the action plan to this episode and then work on it, right? Learn how to look at people's situation from their perspective. Learn how to ask those questions. Learn how to not complain and be concise and avoid using the word but, and get help. Starts right now with this podcast episode. So I urge you to take action. Also, if you got any value from this episode, please share it. Just tell one other person, hey, check out episode 185 on the Success Through Failure podcast. They can find it on any podcast platform, whether it's Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, etc. You can find me on any of those. And so I urge you to just recommend this to one other person, by email or by a text message, or share it on Facebook, Twitter. Of course, you can go, you probably have heard me say this before, but you can go to jimharshawjr.com/share, where you can do a quick share on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn with a quick one click share there. So I appreciate any support in helping grow the audience here. And as always, Take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success.